So, hi everyone. I think we're going to start the webinar now. On my watch, it's 2:30. Whoever joins after that is still welcome, of course. So yeah, welcome everyone to our webinar, 10 years, 2,800 books, the evolution of open access book publishing at the GRUYTER. So this is going to be a OA book focused webinar today. I'm going to introduce myself later. First, I want to introduce our host today, who's behind that black and white GRUYTER button is my dear colleague Laura Bolon. I've worked with her before in editorial, and she does project management for our medieval studies program, and she volunteered today. So thank you, Laura. She's going to manage your questions, should there be questions for the discussions later. Otherwise, she will keep in the background, make sure everything runs smoothly. As you may have noticed, everyone is muted today, and we'd like to keep it that way, but you're of course encouraged to write your questions if you have any in the chat box. And we are also recording this webinar. So you might be able to look at it later. We'll also send the slides and possible Q&A to your email addresses after the webinar. Yeah, my name is Maria.Zucker, and I have been with the GRUYTER for a couple of years now. I have a background in editorial and work as manager open access books now. So my job is at an intersection between editorial, sales, and marketing. And I do OA books all day, every day. Yeah, so for the webinar, I'll tell you some stuff about the state of things here at the GRUYTER, some numbers also compared to the market, our story, the development of open access at the GRUYTER, and what happened in the OA world at the same time. And I'll try to give you an outlook, what we're planning, what we think will happen. And then, of course, it's time for your questions. So, first of all, the state of things. Since we started writing this webinar, we actually named it 10 years, 2,800 books, and we need to rename it now. So it's actually 3,000 books, about 3,000 books. Last time I checked. The GRUYTER.com, which was yesterday, so the title isn't that up to date anymore, and here you can already see that it's very dynamic development and a lot of stuff happening. So as you can see here, it's been quite a growth of open access books on our website. Here on the left hand side, you see that when we started publishing OA books about 10 years ago, it was just a couple of books on the GRUYTER.com, and now big chunks of new OA books are being published each year. And these books also include books by our publisher partners and the so-called free access books that are not published under a CC license. So the original contract doesn't change, but they are made freely available. And on the right hand side, you see big OA publishers according to the DOAB. And here we are head to head with MDPI. Just a couple of weeks ago, the GRUYTER had more open access books, and now MDPI beat us with just a handful of books. So there's also a lot of things happening there. This is the growth of actual gold OA books that are being published each year at the GRUYTER. So in 2010, when we started publishing our first open access book, it was just like 1 or 2 books a year. And that really started to change after, I would say, 2015-16. And now last year we published about 100 gold open access books, which the curve is steep here, but it's still only about 8% of our overall annual publications. So I think it was about just the GRUYTER core business was just 1,200 books last year, and roughly 100 of those were gold open access books. And the share of gold open access books here at GRUYTER is still only about 41%. Most of the books that are available on our website as OA books are actually retrospective OA, so they were published as kind of traditional publications at first and then opened later. And we would like to see a trend towards more gold open access, but retrospective open access is still a big thing, and I don't think it's going to change, but I'm going to talk about this later as well. So this is the GRUYTER compared to the general OA book market. So we took the data from the 2018 SIMBA report. That might actually have changed a bit because it's 2 years old. But as you can see, our core business, especially when it comes to OA books, is the humanities, and most other big open access book publishers, they concentrate on STEM. And we saw on one of the earlier slides that we are head-to-head with MDPI, and there's what is here called SciTech area makes up about 82% of their open access books. So that's a huge difference for us. It's more than 80% in the humanities. For them, it's more than 80% in the STEM market. So there's a huge difference. And what is also really telling here is just some more information about where we are as an OA publisher, is that most open access authors actually come from the DACH area, some from Anglophone countries. The multinational teams might also include authors from DACH and Anglophone countries, and it's just about 10% other nationalities. So our core market or audience is DACH focused, and it is also humanities focused. This right graph here, I don't think it's really easy to read for you, unfortunately, but it's just which licenses are being used. So most of the time we use NC&D license, the very restrictive one, which was our standard license up until I think a year or two back. We also used the CC BY license, but since a lot of the books are published in the humanities, we actually found that most of our authors and editors don't want to choose the CC BY license if that's possible. That's also a thing, a lot of funders want to see more open licenses, but our authors sometimes choose the more restrictive ones. And then the smaller licenses like ND, NC or share alike licenses make up about 0.3% of all publications. And a big chunk is this sort of in-house free access license where the publications are not being published under a CC license at all. They're just freely available, but that also counts as our open access business. That's just the GRUYTER core business. So now I'm going to talk about our story. You know where we are right now, our most recent numbers. And this is actually the, how did we get here? How did it all start? What happened at the same time elsewhere? And where does the story fit? So this is the timeline, small timeline for our open access development, which also includes journals. So 2010, we published the very first open access, gold open access book here at the GRUYTER. So time to celebrate this year, actually. So that was a milestone, but as you could see in the earlier slides, not much happened after this, just a handful, about 3 to 5 open access books each year. In 2012, we acquired the OA book publisher Versica, which is now called Siendo. A year later, we launched the first open access HSS journal. That is the Social Cultural Pragmatics journal. And I think that was also the year that I, in editorial, published or helped to publish the very first open access book that I worked on. It was very special still at that time. No real workflows or routines, and was just felt really celebratory at that time. So 2 years later, we started converting subscription journals to OA for the first time. 2017, a major milestone happened, and that was 1,000 OA books on GRUYTER.com. And last year, a lot of really important things happened. I'm going to talk about this later, where we launched new models for transforming publications to open access, basically. Because I think we mostly worked when it came to gold open access publications with BPCs that the authors had to take care of. Just to show you this, our first open access books 10 years ago, the Handbuch Bibliothek 2.0, and that was published in September 2010, and then the first series Topoi 3 months later. That happened 10 years ago. So it's just, those have their big anniversary this year. What happened in the market at the same time from 2008 on? In 2009, the Austrian Science Foundation was the very first foundation with a funding program just for OA books. 2010 to 13, an actual OA book infrastructure emerged with OA Pen, the DOAB, and Open Edition. 2012, there were the first pure OA book publishers in HSS, like Open Book Publishers and Ubiquity Press. And in 2013, actually the very first scientific conference that was called Open Access Monographs in Humanities and Social Science took place at the British Library in London. Finally, because that was 10 years after the Berlin Declaration. So we're here on a timeline where open access was very much a topic, but books was something that was kind of like concentrated on, worked on much later. So we see the first conference 10 years after the Berlin Declaration. From 2014 on, things got much more dynamic. So according to the DOAB, between 13 and 19, a lot more OA books being published each year. And a lot more publishers actually publishing OA books. So in the beginning, 7 years ago, it was just 55 publishing houses, and now it's more than 200. So that's steady growth, a lot of growth. And according to that SIMBA report I talked about earlier, we see a growth of about 30% each year in open access books. New funding emerged, the European Research Council, the Swiss national funding organs, the Dutch, they all had their own funding for open access books, and new business models emerged. Finally, I think very well known with their crowdfunding model is Knowledge Unlatched, and they had their first pledging round in 2014. And even more pure OA book publishers emerged, which you can see here: Open Library of Humanities, Heidelberg University Press, Language Science Press. And what did we do in the next 4 years? We founded new open access series like actual book series that only publish open access called Open Access Books. And editorial started promoting open access actively. And what's really important for us, and I think that's why you also see that big leap in new gold open access books being published each year for our the GRUYTER core business, is that actually knowledge and infrastructure started being here at the GRUYTER, and also more demand from not only funding bodies, but also our authors and editors. So it's more on everyone's mind, and I think it shows. And not only did we work on singular open access books and book series, but also on umbrella contracts with societies and consortia that have an OA component. So very famous one is the contract with the Institute for Zeitgeschichte, and that's where a huge part of our backlist business comes from. So they open up a lot of books each year. We have participated in, I think, every pledging round with Knowledge Unlatched since 2014. And we published, or we opened up 81 books so far through Knowledge Unlatched. We also became a sponsor of the DOAB 3 years ago. And finally, 2 years ago, we reached that open access book milestone with 1,000 open access books online. And we can't really say which book that was. Some of the books that were published around that time were Golda Meir, a political biography. Another book was Superconductors at the Nanoscale, from Basic Research to Applications. Converts of Conviction, Faith and Skepticism in 19th Century European Jewish Society. And the linguistic integration of adult migrants, some lessons from research. So a lot of different topics and things happening here, something for everyone. So there's of course a press release on that. If you want to look up any of the books, feel free to look at that press release and read the books. Yeah, that was what happened till 2 years ago. And last year was a really important year for us, actually. A lot of our colleagues worked on the GRUYTER Book Archive, which is a project that tries to make available all books that have ever been published by the GRUYTER and one of our funding publishing houses, and to digitize them. And as a part of this book archive project, 270 books of those that were digitized, I think those were in the thousands, were opened up as open access. Those books were chosen by editorial. And of course, no books from 1933 until 1945 were included in that, but that made up about 270 books for 270 years of the GRUYTER that were made available in open access just last year. We signed a cooperation with La Sapienza University in Rome, which is a cooperation with a higher education institution, which we would also like to see more of. So there's an open access book agreement for their classical studies program. They have conditions, special conditions, if they want to publish open access books with us. We started a pilot for an evidence-based selection model with a consortium for Saxony. So they have this EBS model in place that also has an open access component. So they can choose to open up books retrospectively also as a consortium as part of this EBS deal. And we started pilots for crowdfunding models similar to Knowledge Unlatched, but more focused on singular academic disciplines like linguistics or Jewish studies. So whole series, backlist and frontlist get transformed. And here the so-called Fachinformationsdienste, they can actually choose from a backlist and titles that we plan to publish within the next years what they would like to open up. So it's a very new model, very promising, and yeah, that's also something that we would like to see more of, and it's really important to us to change the BPC model from just individual open access BPCs to those that aren't paid by the authors and editors themselves, where you have to look for funding for each individual publication, but to have more institutions involved and just make it easier for the authors to publish open access independently from their institutional affiliation or their own budget. And that's an important step to make OA more accessible for everyone, which is a goal for us, and I think it's a goal for everyone in the wider open access community. So this is where we are. Now, where do we go from here? What does the future hold for us? So we're trying to gaze into the crystal ball, and there are, of course, external factors, especially in Europe. There are new policies in place, like Plan S, the infamous one, or famous and infamous one, which only recently, I think, also added a book component, and the UKRI. But there's not only new policies that demand more open access from original publishing and research projects, but of course there's more funding. The Dutch funding organ, the big one, they have a new budget for open access books, and Horizon Europe also has more OA budget. Outside of Europe, we did not find major OA book funding opportunities in preparation for the future. So this is very Europe focused. Might be, I don't know, maybe you have a comment or a question about this. Could be problematic. And it's also what you could also see earlier for us, an issue that still most of our authors come from the DACH region, possibly European countries, and it's very focused on those regions, basically, with the exception of South America. What's still unclear is the influence of the COVID-19 crisis. What could help with more open access publishing is that everyone is more focused on digital publications, events like this webinar, and it's much more important to have digital publications than it maybe was before, even more so, and to have these publications be easily accessible. So that is the big pro for open access. A contra is the economic situation that we're all in, that a lot of institutions, funding bodies are in, and that isn't easy for everyone. So we know that there might be temporary funding cuts. It looked like there would be more funding available in the Horizon Europe program, for example, but it's indicated now that there actually would be a cut. So we don't know what's going to happen with that OA funding. The same goes for UKRI. Open access programs that were planned to start in 2020 are now rescheduled. And we still think that there might be a huge development, but it's just everything's kind of postponed. So that's a big contra. And what is our vision? What we want to see is more crowdfunding models such as consortia funded models. So go away from the single person BPC funding. We want to see more direct partnerships and agreements between research institutions, libraries, and publishers, so that open access becomes more accessible and the costs for open access are distributed more evenly between different stakeholders. So that would mean less bureaucratic burdens for researchers. They wouldn't have to organize their own funding, which is really complicated. We know that. And people would be less dependent on their own financial budget and their resources as authors. And those crowdfunding models and direct partnerships would also make it easier for people from other countries to publish open access with us. And we also want to see a development towards open research, make this step from OA to OR, and have more data freely accessible and share our data where possible. So I think this is actually a common goal for the GRUYTER research institutions, libraries, and other publishers to alleviate the researchers' work, to release them from bureaucratic burdens, to organize publication costs more effectively. And yeah, I think especially the first two aspects that you see here in our vision actually lead in this direction. It's not always easy to handle those big agreements. They are somewhat complicated, but I think they are worthwhile in the end, because when it comes to actually publishing OA, everything goes a lot more smoothly. And I think that's it for me. You can feel free to ask questions now. And should you rather like to contact me directly, here's my email address, a picture where I have, yeah, it's an older picture, but yes, this is the email address where you can contact me, maria.zucker@GRUYTER.com. And yes, I think I'll just let you ask your questions, should there be any.
Hello, everyone. There's one question, Maria.
Yes.
Do you treat OA books different than non-OA books from an editorial point of view? Any changes over time?
So basically and I think you would agree, the basic project management, the publication process is roughly the same for OA books and non-OA books. When I worked in editorial, what I always found really nice was that there was no economic pressure when it came to OA books. So we really do not care if we sell the book or not. It's taken care of. And of course, there's in some aspects, there's more work to be done. For example, we sell ebooks in ebook packages, and we have to take care that OA books are being taken out of these packages, or I think they're still part of them, but it's like they cost €0 or dollars, of course. And there's more work around the metadata. So we deliver metadata to OAPen, GOAB. I think we did deliver to JSTOR. That's where I come in. That's my job, so I do that quarterly. Yeah, so there's a little bit more work to be done. Of course, contracts have to be changed. Yeah, so that's a bit different. And we also try to keep an eye after publication on download numbers, for example, which are, I think, really good for open access books. So visibility is quite good for those ebooks.
There's one more question. What is your feeling about usage stats for OA books? What are the most useful ones? Usage statistics.
I'm not quite sure. This is something that I have to think about, because the latest statistics that I got, they actually changed from counter 4 to counter 5. So the statistics we get, actually, they changed. I think what we are looking at right now is the more basic, just download rates. That's what we're looking at. And those are, I think, much better for open access books. Yeah, some of the books, they get downloaded like 1,000 times each year. That's just the top sellers, so to say. I hope that answers the questions. I'm not quite sure. If not.
There's another question from the same person. Are you planning to participate in the open access ebook usage data trust?
This I don't know, but I will find out for you. Just if there's a lot of things that I don't know. A couple of weeks I just came back from my parental leave, and but this is a good question, and I will take that up. Yeah, so I see more questions.
These are all questions I can see, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, that's just a thank you. I saw 5. Okay. Yeah.
There another one appeared. Are open access ebooks cheaper to publish? Question.
No. No. In our case, they are not. We rarely publish e-only. We're still somewhat or very traditional book publisher, so every OA book is also available as a printed book, and that's actually also a cost factor for us. So the BPCs are higher than with normal books, actually, for open access. But I think that's true for most OA publishers, at least the more traditional ones that are not purely OA publishers.
There's another thank you, but I can't see any more questions.
Okay.
But yeah, can still wait a second if anyone.
Yeah, we wait a second.
Questions.
Yeah.
Do you see opportunities to enrich books with data?
Yes, we see that very much. Our ebooks at the GRUYTER are not enriched at the moment, and we would very much like to see that, and not only see open access books, but other digital products like databases, for example, to have them being published in OA. And yeah, but for a publisher of that size with that many books being available online, that's a huge step actually. But that's also part of wanting to be part of open research development rather than just putting a PDF out there, to really work on the metadata. And for example, to make more parts of the book accessible.
Okay. How to convince the authors or publishers to participate in open access book?
So publishers. In the last years, when we actually went to conferences, I talked to some colleagues who were rather afraid of open access, and I don't think there's need for that. I think it's a huge part of the future of scholarly publishing, and a part I really welcome, especially because it makes research so accessible. But I can see why other publishers are afraid of that, and I try to tell them that it's really nice to just have a publication that can be read by a lot of people, and it's a lot of fun to publish open access and to think about what that means as a publisher. Our authors, I have to say, I think that in the beginning, a lot of people were they were really skeptical about publishing open access, especially in the humanities. I said that people tend to use the more restrictive licenses, and that's important to a lot of our HSS authors and editors, because they are somewhat afraid, and maybe rightly so, that their publications might be put in a questionable context. But I think that open access is so dominant in the discussion that people you know, it's not about convincing people to go OA, but more our role is more to talk to people about what that means, and the rights part is a big part for the authors, like I said, with the licenses. But yeah, I think with every new thing, there's going to be people who are really not into that development, and we are not trying to push anyone into publishing their book OA if they really don't want to. But yeah, most people really like the aspect that their books are so accessible and that people actually see the books and can read them and do read them. Yes.
One participant is asking, where can we go to access your open access titles? You can, of course, access them at our website. And there's a question concerning the website. How does the construction of the new ebook platform at De Gruyter fit with your open access strategy? Is OA a driving force around building your own platform?
I think the driving factor around building a new platform was to make it easier to actually find our books on there, and that goes for all books, not just open access books. So it's not an OA platform, but we try, like I said, to be part of the important open access platforms and to have our books and our metadata in place there. So I think when you want to say, yeah, I want to make ebooks more easily searchable and readable, then yes, open access of course a factor, but yeah, I just try and see. So if you go to our website, let me see if I can, Laura, you can see this, right?
No, I can only see the presentation still.
Okay, so when you go on our website and you search for publications, you have on the right hand side, so that's degruiter.com, on the right hand side you have like search parameters, and there you can choose to only see free access and open access books. And if you search for those books, you get to see our whole open access library. I hope that helps. Yeah, you're not seeing the site. No, you're not.
Another question is, are you going to expand your OA archives of books about political ideologies and ideas in 20th century?
That's for editorial to decide. I think that's history. If they choose to, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, there are no more questions at the moment.
No. Yeah, we have another comment that the site, I stopped with trying to show the site, but when I send the presentation to your email addresses, I will also send you a search guide for open access books for degruiter.com. Yes. Okay. I don't know if there are no.
Another question popped up. How can we contribute to your open access initiatives from our country?
Yes, I don't see which country that is, unfortunately, but it's always you can always contact me, and if you know who to contact in editorial, that person. If you have something in mind, if it's not about a publication, or if it's about, you know, connecting research institutions with the GRUYTER, then you can contact me. If it's about a publication, I would probably redirect you to editorial. Yes.
Malaysia, it was.
Yeah.
Could you talk a bit about how funding bodies evaluate the publisher support of OA authors' books?
They mostly make demands, which we have to meet. I don't know how really they evaluate this, if they check in regularly, but they of course demand certain CC licenses, or that we use CC licenses at all. I think most funding bodies now switch to CC BY and demand that, and in single cases where people don't want to use CC BY, we take up the discussion with the funding bodies, and mostly they're open to talk to us. They have demands regarding the metadata we share, and that we name the funding bodies. And I think what goes for funding bodies and also organizations like DUAB, they have certain demands for us for how we publish OA, how we share those books, and what our general politics towards OA are, and that we have to be very transparent when it comes to costs as well. So that's a huge thing, and that's also been a development here. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, good. Good. So I can just say what we see a lot, and I think what also you saw in the presentation is that there's a lot of retrospective OA going on, especially when it comes to umbrella deals. We are opening up a lot of our backlist, and I think that's true for editorial as well. What's more, we'd like to see more gold OA compared to retrospective OA. It's a lot more neat, I'd say, because we don't have to care about stuff like double dipping, which is always an issue with retrospective OA, with the costs, with changing the data and contracts and the metadata. But I think the trend goes towards retrospective OA a lot, at least what we see. So I don't know what your feelings are about this, and yeah. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Yeah, it's very difficult not to double dip by accident. It actually is. So we try to avoid opening up books too soon after publishing, actually, because that almost always leads to double dipping. And like I said, those ebooks need to be taken out of larger deals as well, like ebook packages, for example. So it's always nice when funding emerges and someone wants to open up their book. We almost never say no to this, but yeah, double dipping is a big thing. Yeah. So there's a comment, it's very difficult not to double dip by accident, which I read, especially when some aggregators don't accept OA ebooks yet. Yeah, I think it's a data problem sometimes when you have an ebook that doesn't cost anything. I think some aggregators, they can't work with that data. I don't know if it's like a decision not to include ebooks.
What metadata enrichment do you have to do for your OA ebooks?
At the time, I don't think all that much, unfortunately. Like I said, it's projects in the making, but we're sharing the basics, or making the basic metadata available. Yeah. So the comment is, I was wondering about the new MARC fields for AA and Onyx for AA monographs new standards emerging. Yes, we always, of course, try to keep up to date with those new standards. And that's actually something I would like to take up later, if that's okay. Because that's not my specialty at the moment, but yes.
Looks like there are no more questions.
Yeah, I think so. So about the metadata, feel free to contact me after the webinar. Just, will do. Okay. Yes. Okay. So if there are no more questions now, I think we can stop. And I would like to thank everyone. A lot of questions, just very nice. And thank you so much for participating. And like I said, feel free to contact me anytime. I will try and show you the slide with my email address again. Here it is. Yeah. Thank you too.